Let me begin with an uncomfortable fact that most people spend their entire lives trying to ignore. Most people do not lose money because they are unlucky. They do not fail because the world is against them or because they lacked a brilliant idea. They lose money and stay stagnant because they behave badly when it matters most. They are victims of their own biology. They chase what is popular because it feels safe. They borrow too much because they are impatient and they confuse frantic activity with actual progress. Most importantly, they keep repeating the same mistakes because their ego has a desperate need to feel smart rather than actually being right. If you are looking for a magic formula, a secret ticker symbol, or a get-rich-quick scheme that will solve your problems by next week, you should stop listening immediately. I have no interest in entertaining the delusions of people who want to gamble with their lives. I am here for the person who is willing to think, the person who is willing to wait, and the person who is willing to act with a level of discipline that others find boring or even extreme. Here is my challenge for you. Stop trying to be brilliant. Being brilliant is difficult and rare. Instead, focus on being consistently not stupid. Most of life's greatest rewards do not come from making 1,000 right decisions. They come from avoiding the 5 or 6 big blunders that ruin most people. Build a life that makes stupidity harder and good judgment easier. If you do this with discipline, you will be amazed how quickly your results improve. This improvement will not happen because you successfully predicted the future, but because you finally stopped sabotaging it. The world is full of people who were considered geniuses until leverage turned a temporary setback into a permanent loss. Staying in the game is the first and only requirement for compounding to work its magic. In the next hour, I am going to give you a framework for investing and for living. You will learn how to spot risk before it becomes regret, how to identify the hidden incentives that drive human behavior, and how to choose actions that compound for decades. If you want true wealth, stop chasing excitement and start building durability. Accept this reality, and your future self will thank you for your rationality. Most people spend their time dreaming about success. They visualize the wealth, the cars, and the freedom. But if you want to be a rational investor, you must learn to do the opposite. I have always believed in the power of inversion. It is a concept I learned from the great mathematician Carl Jacobi. He used to say, invert, always invert. This means that if you want to solve a complex problem, you should turn it upside down. Instead of asking, how can I make a lot of money? You should ask, what will make me lose everything? What will lead to my financial ruin? When you list the things that cause failure, like heavy debt, gambling, excessive ego, and following the crowd, you get a clear map of what to avoid. If you simply stay away from those paths, you will find yourself on the road to wealth by default. Success is often the byproduct of being consistently not stupid over a long period. People find this idea boring. They want to hear about the next big technology or a secret trading algorithm, but I am telling you that avoiding the big blunders is far more important than seeking the big wins. Inversion forces you to be honest with yourself. It strips away the optimism that blinds people to risk. When you look at a business, do not just look at why it might succeed. Look at all the ways it could die. Could a competitor with more cash destroy it? Could a change in government regulation make its product obsolete? If you cannot survive the worst-case scenario, then the best-case scenario is irrelevant. Durable wealth is built on a foundation of safety, and inversion is the tool that helps you build that foundation. Consider the history of massive corporate failures. Look at companies like Sears or Kodak. At their peak, everyone was asking how they could grow larger. No one was asking the inverse question, what could destroy our dominance? If they had practiced inversion, they might have seen that a shift in digital technology or retail habits was a lethal threat. By the time they realized it, it was too late. An investor using inversion would have seen these vulnerabilities years in advance. They wouldn't have needed to be a genius. They just needed to look for the holes in the boat. To apply this to your personal life, consider what would make you miserable in old age. The answer is usually poor health, being broke, and having no one who loves you. To avoid that outcome, you simply work backwards. You exercise today, you save today, and you treat people with kindness today. It is not about genius. It is about the simple avoidance of terrible outcomes. In the investment world, this means refusing to buy into bubbles even when your friends are making quick money. It means keeping enough cash to survive a depression. By focusing on how not to lose, you ensure that you stay in the game long enough for compounding to do the heavy lifting. Most people are so busy trying to be brilliant that they forget to be reliable. Reliability and the avoidance of disaster are the twin pillars of a wealthy life. Why is this so hard for people to do? It is because our biology wants us to be optimistic. We want to believe in the best-case scenario because it gives us a dopamine hit. Inversion is painful because it forces you to confront the possibility of failure. It requires you to look into the abyss and see the risks that others are ignoring. But this is exactly what a professional does. A professional pilot doesn't just think about a smooth landing. They spend their training obsessing over what to do when the engine fails. A professional surgeon doesn't just think about the successful operation. They prepare for the sudden hemorrhage. If you want to be a professional in your finances, you must adopt this mindset. Ask yourself every morning, what is the biggest threat to my current plan? Is it my own ego? Is it a lack of diversification? Is it my dependence on a single source of income? Once you identify the threat, you work to eliminate it. This is the too hard pile in action. If a problem is too complex to solve, don't try to be a hero. Invert the problem and see if there is a simpler way to avoid the problem entirely. I have often said that all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. That sounds like a joke, but it is the most profound investment advice I can give. If you know that most investors die in the leverage graveyard, do not use leverage. If you know they die in the buying things, I do not understand graveyard, then stay within your circle of competence. It is remarkably easy to get rich. If you are not in a hurry, and you are not trying to be the smartest person in the room. Inversion is also the cure for envy. Envy is a giant cause of misery and bad decisions. When you see someone making a fortune in a crypto bubble or a speculative tech stock, invert the situation. Instead of thinking about their profit, think about the risk they are taking. Think about the stress of knowing their wealth could vanish overnight. When you see the hidden costs of their success, your envy vanishes. You realize that your slow, steady, rational path is far superior because it is durable. You aren't just building wealth. You are building a life that can withstand the storms. And in the end, the person who's still standing when the storm passes is the one who wins. The human mind is a flawed instrument. We are prone to forgetfulness, emotional bias, and simple fatigue. Even the most brilliant surgeons and pilots use checklists because they know that under pressure, the brain skips steps. Investing and life choices are no different. You cannot rely on your intuition or your mood to make important decisions. You need a formal process. I have always used mental checklists to filter my thoughts. Most people think they are too smart for a checklist. They think their intuition is a superpower. But in the world of high-stakes decision-making, intuition is often just another word for an emotional impulse disguised as logic. Before I buy a stock or make a life-changing choice, I run it through a series of filters. Is this within my circle of competence? Do I understand the incentives of the people involved? Is there a margin of safety in the price? Is the business model durable? If the answer to any of these is no, I walk away. Most people fail because they let their emotions drive the car. They feel excited about a new trend, and they jump in without checking the brakes. They are flying a plane without a flight plan, and they are surprised when they crash into a mountain. A checklist is not just a list of tasks. It is a shield against your own psychology. It slows you down. It forces you to be methodical. In a world that is obsessed with speed and quick results, the person who has the discipline to slow down and check their facts will always have the advantage. You must treat your life and your portfolio like a high-stakes mission. You do not leave things to chance. You verify, you cross-check, and you act only when the data is in your favor. Think about the pilot of a 747. He has flown thousands of hours, yet before every takeoff, he goes through the same checklist. Why? Because the cost of a single mistake is total destruction. In investing, the cost of a single emotional mistake can be the destruction of 20 years of compounding. If you are not using a checklist, you are basically saying that your memory and your mood are perfect every single day. That is not just arrogant, it is dangerous. A professional checklist should cover multiple dimensions of a problem. First, you have the analytical filters. You look at the numbers, the debt, the cash flow, and the competitive landscape. Then you have the psychological filters. This is where you ask yourself, am I buying this because I want to be right, or because the facts are right? Am I being influenced by the fact that a person I admire owns this stock? This is the social proof check. By the time you get to the end of the checklist, most of your great ideas will have been discarded, and that is exactly the point. The goal of a checklist is not to find things to do. It is to find reasons to say no. We live in an age of information overload. Every day, you are bombarded with news, opinions, and opportunities. Without a checklist, your brain will naturally gravitate toward the loudest or most recent information. This is a cognitive shortcut that leads to disaster. A checklist forces you to give equal weight to the boring fundamental truths that actually matter. It anchors you to reality when the rest of the market is floating away on a cloud of optimism. I have often said that Warren and I have been successful because we are dispassionate. The checklist is the engine of that dispassion. It removes the human element from the parts of the process where the human element is a liability. Consider the too hard pile. This is one of the most important items on my personal checklist. If I look at a business and it is so complex that I cannot explain its future in 3 simple sentences, I don't try to be a genius. I put it in the too hard pile and move on to something simpler. Most people fail because they try to solve the hardest problems. They think that the more complex a solution is, the more money they will make. The reality is the opposite. The big money is made by finding easy, obvious things and doing them consistently. A checklist helps you identify the easy and discard the hard. Furthermore, your checklist must be dynamic. Every time you make a mistake, you must analyze why it happened and add a new filter to your checklist to ensure it never happens again. This is how you build a personal operating system that gets stronger over time. You are effectively coding your brain to avoid errors. When people look at our success at Berkshire, they see the big wins. What they don't see are the thousands of mistakes we avoided because our checklist wouldn't let us through the door. In the long run, the person with the most disciplined process wins. It is not about having the highest IQ. It is about having the best filters. If you can develop the temperament to follow your checklist even when your heart is racing and your friends are making quick money elsewhere, you will become part of the small minority that achieves durable wealth. You must respect the process more than the outcome. If you followed your checklist and the outcome was bad, you can live with that. That is just the luck of the draw. But if you abandoned your process and the outcome was good, you have committed a cardinal sin. You have practiced being lucky instead of being right. And in the game of compounding, luck always runs out. But a disciplined process only gets stronger. I have said it many times, and I will say it again because the world refuses to learn. Show me the incentive, and I will show you the outcome. This is perhaps the most important rule in the history of human civilization. Most people are blind to how incentives shape the world around them. They think people act based on pure morals, lofty logic, or individual personality. But the cold, hard reality is that people act based on how they are rewarded and what they fear losing. If you want to understand why a company is failing, why a government is corrupt, or why a person is making destructive choices, do not look at their speeches. Look at the reward system. In the world of finance, incentives are often misaligned in a way that is predatory to the average person. This is what we call the agency problem. Your broker is not your partner. He is a salesman. He is paid to make you trade, not to make you rich. Every time you move your money, he gets a commission. Therefore, he is incentivized to create a sense of urgency, to tell you that you are missing out, and to keep you in a state of constant activity. If you do not recognize these hidden forces, you are not an investor. You are a victim. Similarly, a CEO is often paid to increase the stock price this year because his options vest on a short-term schedule. He will hollow out the research department and skip necessary maintenance just to hit a quarterly target that triggers his bonus. By the time the company's foundation rots away 5 years from now, he will be long gone with his money. You must align your life with people and systems that reward honesty, long-term thinking, and rationality. At Berkshire Hathaway, we have always tried to design incentives that make our managers think like owners. We want them to feel the pain of a loss as much as the joy of a gain. If you are investing in a company where the management has no skin in the game, you are asking for trouble. When people have no real consequences for their failure, they become reckless. This is a law of nature. You would not fly in an airplane where the pilot had a parachute, but the passengers did not. You want a pilot who is incentivized to land safely because his life is on the line too. This principle applies just as powerfully to your own personal habits and your path to wealth. If you reward yourself for working hard, you will find it easier to work harder. But if your social circle rewards you for spending money on luxury items to signal status, you will find it mathematically impossible to save. You are fighting against the social incentive of your environment. You must carefully design your own internal and external incentives. Surround yourself with people who admire wisdom, character, and frugality, rather than status and flash. If you are the only person in your group trying to save money, you are fighting an uphill battle. But if you move into a circle where sensible living is the norm, wealth becomes an inevitable byproduct of your social life. Make your environment support your goals. If you want to save more, make the incentive for saving immediate. Visualize the freedom you're buying, not the consumption you are skipping. Use commitment devices to make bad behavior difficult. For example, if you know you are prone to impulsive spending, do not keep your credit card information saved on your phone. Make the friction of a bad decision high and the reward for a good decision obvious. When your internal and external incentives are pointing in the same direction, you do not need to rely on willpower. Willpower is a finite resource that runs out when you are tired or stressed. A well-designed incentive system, however, works even when you are at your weakest. Success becomes the natural, quiet result of the structural choices you have made. I often think about the history of the Xerox machine. When they first introduced it, they couldn't understand why the newer, better machines weren't selling as well as the older ones. They eventually realized the sales force was getting a much higher commission on the old machines. The salespeople weren't evil. They were just responding to the incentive. As soon as the commissions were leveled, the new machines took over the market. This happens everywhere, in medicine, in law, in construction. If you pay a plumber by the hour, don't be surprised if the job takes all day. If you pay him by the job, don't be surprised if he finishes in 20 minutes. To be a rational person, you must develop incentive super-response awareness. You must look at every interaction and ask, what is the person on the other side of the table being rewarded for? If you are a business owner, you must spend a huge amount of time making sure your employees are incentivized to do what is best for the customer, not just what is best for their own pocket in the short term. This is the only way to build a durable, multi-decade enterprise. Trust compounds, but trust is only possible when the incentives support it. Designing incentives that protect your reputation is not just moral, it is practical intelligence. In a world where everyone is trying to take a shortcut, the person who is structurally incentivized to be honest becomes a magnet for opportunities. Other rational people will seek you out. They will want to do business with you because they know your system won't let you cheat them. This is how you build a lattice work of relationships that multiply your wealth. Wealth is not just about the numbers in your bank account, it is about the quality of the systems you have built around yourself. If your system rewards wisdom, you will become wise. If it rewards patience, you will become wealthy. It is as simple and as difficult as that you cannot really know anything if you just remember isolated facts and try to bank them back. If the facts do not hang together on a latticework of theory, you do not have them in a usable form. You must have multiple models in your head. Most people are trained in one narrow field, like economics or marketing. They try to solve every problem with the one tool they have. This is what I call the man with a hammer syndrome. To the man with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. This is a disastrous way to think because the world is much more complex than any one field of study. You must build a latticework of mental models in your head. You need to take the big ideas from the big disciplines, mathematics, biology, physics, history, and psychology, and hang your experience on them. If you do not have these models, you are just memorizing isolated facts, and facts without a framework are useless. You cannot really know anything if you cannot explain why it is happening based on the fundamental laws of reality. Take mathematics, for example. You do not need to be a calculus expert to be a wealthy investor, but you must understand basic probability and permutations. If you cannot calculate the odds of an event, you are just gambling. You must understand how to look at a business and estimate the probability of its success over 10 years. Most people buy a stock because the price went up yesterday. That is not math. That is a social fever. You must also understand compound interest, which is the most important concept in finance. If you understand the math of compounding, you will realize that a small advantage held for a long time produces extraordinary results. You will stop looking for the home run and start looking for the steady, repeatable gain. Then there is biology. The concept of evolution and natural selection applies to business just as much as it applies to the jungle. Companies are organisms. They are born, they compete for resources, and they either adapt or they die. When a new technology arrives, it is an evolutionary shock to the system. If you understand biology, you will look for the companies that have the adaptive capacity to survive. You will avoid the dinosaurs that are too big and too slow to change. You will recognize that a business with a narrow niche is like a species that has evolved to survive in a specific climate. If that climate changes, the species goes extinct. Physics also provides essential models, particularly the concept of equilibrium and critical mass. In business, certain companies reach a point of critical mass where their size and scale become a massive advantage that competitors cannot overcome. We call this a moat. Conversely, you must understand the laws of thermodynamics, that everything tends toward disorder unless energy is put into the system. A business that is not constantly innovating and improving is naturally decaying. This is a law of physics, and no amount of clever marketing can change it. Perhaps the most important part of this lattice work is psychology. I have spent decades studying the psychology of human misjudgment. Our brains are wired for a world that no longer exists. We are prone to social proof, which means we do what everyone else is doing. We are prone to loss aversion, which means we panic when we lose a small amount of money, even if the long-term outlook is great. If you do not understand these biases, you are a puppet on a string, being pulled by your own instincts. A rational person uses the other models, math, physics, and biology, to check their psychological impulses. This multidisciplinary approach is the only way to achieve what I call worldly wisdom. If you rely on just one model, you will be walked over by people who see the world more clearly than you do. You do not need to be an expert in everything, but you must understand the fundamental principles that govern how the world works. Read widely. Study history to see how empires and companies rise and fall. Study psychology to see how people are easily fooled. The more models you have, the better your judgment becomes. And in the long run, The person with the best judgment wins. Most people find this way of thinking too much work. They want a simple hack or a single formula. But there are no simple formulas for complex systems like the stock market or a human life. The reward for doing the work is that you gain a massive competitive advantage over the majority of the population who are lazy thinkers. While they are reacting emotionally to the news of the day, you are analyzing the situation through your lattice work of models. You are seeing the structural reality while they are seeing the surface noise. This is how you develop the temperament to be a great investor. Temperament is not something you are born with. It is something you build through a rational framework. When you know why something is happening because you understand the underlying models, you don't get scared when the market drops. You don't get greedy when the market bubbles. You stay calm because you are anchored in reality. You are like a man with a map in a room full of blind people. You don't have to run as fast as they do. You just have to know where the door is. Worldly wisdom is the ultimate form of wealth. Money can be stolen, devalued, or lost through a series of bad luck. But a well-developed mind that understands the lattice work of reality is an asset that can never be taken away. It allows you to reinvent yourself, to spot opportunities where others see chaos, and to avoid the traps that ruin the undisciplined. If you want to be wealthy, stop studying the ticker tape and start studying the big ideas of the world. Build your lattice work, and the money will eventually find its way to you. I have spent decades studying the ways the human mind fails. It is not enough to be smart. You must also be aware of the specific psychological tendencies that cause smart people to do things that are incredibly stupid. Our brains are not designed for modern financial markets. They are designed for a world where you had to make split-second decisions to survive a predator. In the stock market, those same survival instincts will lead you to bankruptcy. One of the most powerful tendencies is what I call social proof. We are social animals, and we feel a deep biological need to do what the rest of the tribe is doing. When you see everyone around you making money in a speculative bubble, your brain screams at you to join them. This is the source of almost every market mania in history, from the Dutch tulip bulb craze to the dot-com bubble. If you cannot handle the social pressure of being the only person at a dinner party who is not getting rich on a fad, you are going to lose your money. You must develop the contrarian muscle. You must be able to stand alone and say, "The crowd is wrong, and I am going to wait." Another lethal bias is the commitment and consistency tendency. Once we make a public statement or an investment, we feel a desperate need to be consistent with that choice. We don't want to admit we were wrong. This is why people hold on to failing stocks all the way to zero. They are not protecting their money. They are protecting their ego. I have always tried to be the kind of person who is happy to be proven wrong. If you can destroy your own best-loved ideas, you have a massive advantage over the rest of the world. The man who can change his mind when the facts change is a king among fools. Then there is the liking or disliking tendency. We tend to ignore the faults of people or companies we like, and we ignore the virtues of things we dislike. This blinds us to reality. If you love a brand, you might ignore the fact that its debt is spiraling out of control. If you dislike a certain industry, you might miss a once-in-a-century investment opportunity. You must learn to look at the world with a cold, clinical eye. You must be able to see the flaws in your favorites and the strengths in your enemies. Rationality is the ability to see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. We also suffer from reward super-response tendency. This is the tendency to act based on immediate rewards rather than long-term consequences. It is why people eat junk food even though they want to be healthy, and why investors chase short-term gains even though they want long-term wealth. To be successful, you must invert this. You must find a way to make the long-term goal feel more rewarding than the short-term impulse. This is why I talk about the discipline of the long term. You are fighting your own chemistry every single day. Wealth is not just a number in a bank account. True wealth is the freedom to live a life governed by reason rather than impulse. To achieve this, you must adopt a philosophy of simplicity and continuous improvement. Most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. They are in such a hurry to get rich that they never build a foundation that can sustain that riches. Avoid lifestyle inflation. As your income grows, your ego will tell you to buy a bigger house, a faster car, and more expensive toys. This is a trap. It turns you into a slave of your own consumption. It destroys your margin of safety. If you live a simple life, you have the power to say no to bad deals and toxic people. You have the luxury of waiting for the fat pitch in the market. Simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication and the most reliable path to independence. You must also be a lifelong learning machine. If you stop learning, you stop being useful. I have never seen a truly successful person who was not a constant reader. You need to be curious about everything. Why does that business work? Why did that empire fall? Why do people behave that way? The more you understand how the world works, the fewer mistakes you will make. And in the game of life, the person with the fewest mistakes wins. Finally, remember that integrity is the most important part of compounding. Trust is a functional necessity in a complex economy. If people can trust you, your life becomes much easier, doors open for you that stay closed for everyone else. Reputation is like a fragile glass. Once cracked, it is never the same. Protect your character with the same intensity that you protect your capital. In the long run, your character will be the thing that brings you the most wealth and the most peace of mind. We have covered a lot of ground. We talked about avoiding ruin, the power of incentives, the lattice work of mental models, and the traps of the human mind. None of this is easy. It requires a level of discipline and patience that most people find uncomfortable. But the rewards are extraordinary. If you build a life based on these principles, you're not just building wealth. You're building a life that is durable. You are building a mind that can withstand the storms of the market and the chaos of the world. You are becoming a rational person in an irrational world. Stop chasing excitement. Stop looking for shortcuts. Start building your foundation today. Let time be your partner. Let compounding do the work. Accept this challenge, and your future self will look back with deep gratitude for the choices you made today. The world belongs to the patient and the rational. Be one of them.